For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the morning of April 15, 1990, 33-year-old Samantha Brooks set out on New Zealand's legendary Milford track, a breathtaking 4-day journey through Fiordland National Park. An experienced tramper and environmental science teacher, she was living her passion, exploring the pristine wilderness she had taught about for years. But on day 3, as storm clouds gathered over the majestic southern Alps, Samantha never arrived at Dumpling Hut. Despite an exhaustive search operation that discovered her backpack near a treacherous river crossing, Samantha had vanished into the vast expanse of one of New Zealand's most remote locations. For 25 years, her disappearance remained one of the country's most perplexing wilderness mysteries. Then, in 2015, Department of Conservation workers made a grim discovery beneath a tangle of fallen trees, far from the main track. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Samantha Brooks, and the dark secret that had been hiding in plain sight on New Zealand's most famous hiking trail. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. In late October 1990, the Milford track stretched before Samantha Brooks like a jade-colored ribbon, winding through New Zealand's most spectacular wilderness. The 33-year-old environmental science teacher from Auckland had dreamed of this solo trek for years, meticulously planning every detail of her 4-day journey through Fiordland National Park. The morning of her disappearance dawned crisp and clear, perfect hiking weather for the challenging 3rd day of the track. Samantha signed out from Mintaro Hut at 7 a.m., her signature in the logbook neat and confident. Fellow hikers remembered her cheerful demeanor as she shouldered her red Macpac backpack, adjusting the straps with practiced ease before heading toward the infamous Mackinnon Pass. She was so excited about photographing the native orchids, recalled Sarah Thompson, one of the last people to see Samantha alive. She told us she'd spotted some rare specimens the previous day and wanted to document them for her students. The Milford track, known as one of New Zealand's greatest walks, reveals its most treacherous nature on day 3. The path climbs steeply through alpine terrain before descending into the Arthur Valley, where fast-moving streams cut through dense forest. It was here, somewhere between the heights of Mackinnon Pass and the shelter of Dumpling Hut, that Samantha Brooks vanished without a trace. By nightfall, when Samantha failed to arrive at Dumpling Hut, the track warden initiated standard missing person protocols. The weather had deteriorated rapidly that afternoon, with heavy rain and wind gusts up to 60 kilometers per hour conditions that could disorient even the most experienced trampers. The discovery of her backpack the next morning sent a chill through the search teams. It lay partially submerged near a river crossing, its contents scattered along the rocky shore. The camera was missing, but her passport and trail maps remained inside, along with a half-eaten muesli bar, suggesting whatever happened had occurred suddenly and without warning. Sergeant Helen Parker, who led the initial search operation, remembered the moment with stark clarity. Everything about the scene felt wrong, she said. Samantha was too experienced to attempt a dangerous river crossing in those conditions. And the way her gear was spread out, it didn't match the pattern we typically see in accident scenarios. Over the next 2 weeks, more than 60 search and rescue personnel combed the surrounding wilderness. Helicopters swept the valleys while ground teams navigated treacherous terrain, calling Samantha's name into the endless green expanse. But the Fiordland forest held its secrets close, offering no further clues to her fate. The last confirmed sighting of Samantha came from a German hiking couple who passed her on the track around 11 that morning. She was approximately 2 hours from Mackinnon Pass, taking photographs of the landscape. They described her as confident and well-equipped, showing no signs of distress. She asked us about the weather ahead, Hans Mueller later told investigators. We chatted briefly about the cloud formations over the pass. She seemed perfectly at ease in the environment, exactly what you'd expect from someone with her hiking experience. As news of Samantha's disappearance spread through New Zealand's tight-knit outdoor community, her students and colleagues at Auckland Grammar School struggled to reconcile the loss of their beloved teacher. The woman who had inspired countless young minds to embrace environmental science had herself become another tragic statistic in the park's history. Her sister, Margaret Brooks, spoke at a press conference 1 week into the search. Samantha lived for these mountains. She respected them, understood their dangers, and never took unnecessary risks. Something happened to her out there, something that had nothing to do with the natural hazards she was so carefully prepared for. Those words would prove prophetic, though it would take 25 years before the true nature of Samantha's disappearance came to light. As the initial search wound down and hope faded, no one suspected that the pristine wilderness of the Milford track harbored not just natural dangers, but human predators as well. The initial investigation into Samantha Brooks' disappearance revealed the complex challenges of conducting a search operation in one of New Zealand's most unforgiving landscapes. Sergeant Helen Parker arrived at Dumpling Hut by helicopter within hours of the first alert, bringing with her a seasoned team of search and rescue specialists familiar with Fiordland's treacherous terrain. The discovery of Samantha's backpack near Clinton Stream presented investigators with their first significant puzzle. The pack lay at an unusual angle, its contents spread in a pattern that suggested it had been rifled through rather than simply swept away by water. A detailed inventory revealed that while valuable items like her passport remained, her camera and personal diary were conspicuously absent. The distribution of items didn't align with what we typically see in accident scenarios, Sergeant Parker would later note. In flood-related incidents, belongings tend to be carried downstream in a predictable pattern. This scene felt deliberately disturbed. The weather that had descended upon the track complicated matters significantly. Low cloud cover severely restricted helicopter operations, while steady rain made ground searching both dangerous and less effective. Search teams had to contend with swollen streams, slippery rock faces, and near-zero visibility at higher elevations. Department of Conservation staff provided crucial local knowledge, identifying areas where hikers commonly strayed from the marked track. Senior Ranger David Thompson pointed out several unofficial side trails that experienced trampers sometimes explored in search of distinctive flora. Given Samantha's interest in native orchids, these locations became priority search zones. As the first week progressed, a methodical grid search extended outward from the backpack's location. Teams of highly trained searchers probed the dense undergrowth, navigating through tangles of tree ferns and moss-covered logs. Specialist alpine teams scaled the steep faces of Mackinnon Pass, checking crevices and overhangs where a climber might have sought shelter. The investigation took an unsettling turn when interviews with other hikers revealed several unusual encounters on the track in the days surrounding Samantha's disappearance. 2 solo female trampers reported feeling uncomfortable around one of the track staff, though they couldn't pinpoint exactly why. These reports were noted, but initially overshadowed by the urgent need to locate Samantha. Sergeant Parker's team faced mounting pressure as media attention intensified. The story of the missing environmental teacher captured national interest, with daily updates becoming regular features on evening news broadcasts. Samantha's family maintained a constant presence at the search base, their hope visibly dimming with each unsuccessful day. Weather conditions briefly improved during the second week, allowing the deployment of thermal imaging equipment. However, the dense canopy severely limited its effectiveness. Police divers searched the deeper pools of Clinton Stream, while specialist cave rescue teams explored several limestone formations in the vicinity. As the search entered its third week, physical evidence remained frustratingly scarce. Apart from the backpack, Only a single bootprint matching Samantha's hiking boots was found, preserved in mud approximately 200 meters from where her pack was discovered. The print's direction suggested she had moved away from the main track, but the trail ended abruptly at a rocky outcrop. The lack of additional physical evidence began to shift the investigation's focus. Sergeant Parker ordered a detailed review of track operations and staff movements on the day of Samantha's disappearance. The team compiled a comprehensive timeline, cross-referencing witness statements with HUT logbooks and staff radio communications. By the end of the third week, with no further signs of Samantha found, the full-scale search operation was reluctantly scaled back. The decision weighed heavily on Sergeant Parker, who had come to know Samantha through her family's stories and the passionate testimonials of her students and colleagues. Scaling back doesn't mean giving up, Parker assured the Brooks family. We're transitioning from an acute search to a detailed investigation. Something happened to your daughter on that track, and we will find the truth. What no one could have known then was that the truth would remain hidden in the Fiordland wilderness for another quarter-century, preserved like the native flora Samantha had so loved to teach about, waiting for time and circumstance to bring it into the light. As autumn faded into winter, the dense forests of Fiordland National Park held their silence about Samantha Brooks' fate. The massive search operation, which had dominated New Zealand headlines for weeks, gradually contracted to routine patrols and occasional helicopter sweeps. The case that had captured the nation's attention was slowly, painfully, going cold. By December 1990, most of the search teams had been reassigned. Only Sergeant Helen Parker maintained regular contact with the Brooks family, making weekly calls that became monthly updates, each one shorter than the last as new leads failed to materialize. The empty spaces in these conversations grew heavier with each passing season. The impact on New Zealand's hiking community was profound. Milford track bookings saw a sharp decline, particularly among solo female trampers. The Department of Conservation implemented new safety protocols, requiring hikers to travel in pairs and installing additional emergency communication points along the track's more isolated stretches. Margaret Brooks became a fierce advocate for wilderness safety reform, channeling her grief into action. She appeared regularly on national television, pushing for improved tracking systems and mandatory personal locator beacons for all backcountry hikers. My sister's disappearance exposed dangerous gaps in our safety net, she told reporters. We can't bring Samantha back, but we can prevent other families from experiencing this nightmare. The case file grew thick with false leads and dead ends. A reported sighting in Stewart Island proved to be a case of mistaken identity. A weathered backpack discovered by hunters near Lake Te Anau belonged to an unrelated hiker who had abandoned it years earlier. Each false hope took its toll on the investigation team and the Brooks family alike. At Auckland Grammar School, Samantha's absence left an unfillable void. Her classroom remained largely unchanged, her detailed sketches of native plants still adorning the walls. Students maintained a small memorial garden of indigenous species she had loved to teach about, the plants thriving just as her lessons continued to resonate in their lives. As months turned to years, the case joined others in the cold case files of New Zealand's unsolved mysteries. Occasional articles appeared on anniversaries, but public interest gradually waned. Only the regular hikers of Milford Track kept her memory alive, passing the story down like folklore to newcomers on the trail. The Department of Conservation maintained a discreet but constant vigilance. Rangers were instructed to report any unusual findings, particularly in the areas where Samantha's backpack had been discovered. They developed a particular sensitivity to certain markers: disturbed soil, unexpected clearings, anything that seemed out of place in the carefully preserved wilderness. In 1994, a development briefly rekindled interest in the case. Thomas Kelly, a former track warden who had worked during the period of Samantha's disappearance, died in a mountaineering accident on Mount Aspiring. His death barely warranted mention in connection with the Brooks case at the time, th. All years later, this detail would prove crucially important. By the turn of the millennium, Samantha's case had become a cautionary tale in New Zealand's outdoor community. Her story was taught in wilderness safety courses, analyzed in search and rescue training, and discussed in hiking forums. Yet the fundamental question remained unanswered. How could an experienced tramper simply vanish on one of the country's most well-maintained tracks? The years crept by, and technology evolved. New forensic techniques emerged, and cold case investigation methods improved. Periodically, Sergeant Parker, now promoted but still haunted by the case, would review the files with fresh eyes. She knew that somewhere in the dense undergrowth of the Fiordland bush, answers remained hidden, waiting to be found. For 15 years, the native orchids Samantha had so loved continued their cycles of bloom and dormancy along the Milford track. The wilderness kept its secrets as the seasons turned and changed. But nature's patience is infinite, and eventually, even the deepest buried truths find their way to the surface. In 2015, as Department of Conservation workers cleared storm damage from an area far from the main track, they would make a discovery that would finally begin to unravel the mystery of Samantha Brooks' disappearance. On a mild spring morning in 2015, Department of Conservation workers Claire Bennett and Mike O'Connor were clearing storm damage several kilometers off the main Milford track. Heavy rains had toppled ancient beech trees, creating a tangle of roots and debris that needed clearing to prevent erosion into nearby waterways. As they worked to remove a particularly large root ball, something caught Claire's eye, a flash of white against the dark soil that didn't match the usual forest debris. Her initial thought was that they'd uncovered another animal skeleton, a common enough find in the bush. But as she brushed away more soil, her breath caught in her throat. The shape was unmistakably human. "I'll never forget that moment," Claire later recalled. "The bone was partially exposed and I just knew. 15 years in conservation work, you learn to recognize these things. This wasn't a deer or a sheep, this was someone's loved one." The work stopped immediately. The site was secured, and within hours, a forensic team led by Dr. James Murphy was carefully documenting every detail of the scene. The location itself posed immediate questions. The remains lay nearly 3 kilometers from the main track, in an area rarely visited even by maintenance crews. The methodical excavation revealed more than just bones. Fragments of hiking boots, preserved by the acidic soil, caught Dr. Murphy's attention. The distinctive tread pattern and manufacturing details matched the type Samantha Brooks had been wearing when she disappeared. More significantly, the boot size and wear patterns aligned perfectly with those documented in the original missing person report. Lisa Wang, the Department of Conservation's lead investigator, recognized the significance of the location. "This wasn't a place anyone would accidentally wander," she observed. "The terrain leading here is challenging, with no logical reason for a hiker to deviate so far from the marked trail." This suggested something far more sinister than a simple hiking accident. The recovery operation took nearly 2 weeks. Each layer of soil revealed new details, carefully preserved by the forest's unique conditions. The remains had been deliberately concealed, buried beneath rocks and organic matter that had accumulated over decades. The positioning suggested the body had been hidden with purpose, not simply left where a fall or natural death had occurred. The discovery sent shockwaves through New Zealand's hiking community. For many, particularly those who had been involved in the original search, the location challenged everything they had assumed about Samantha's disappearance. The site lay in the opposite direction from where search efforts had concentrated, well outside the projected areas where an injured or lost hiker might have wandered. Margaret Brooks received the news with a complex mixture of grief and relief. Part of me had always hoped that somehow, somewhere, Samantha was still alive, she said. But another part knew we needed answers, needed to know what happened that day on the track. Finding her, it's like the mountain, finally decided to speak. Dr. Murphy's initial forensic assessment revealed evidence of trauma that couldn't be explained by natural causes or animal activity. The bones told a story of violence, with defensive injuries suggesting Samantha had fought fiercely for her life. But it was the smallest pieces of evidence that would prove most crucial microscopic traces preserved under what remained of her fingernails. The discovery marked a turning point in the investigation. What had been a missing person case, wrapped in the uncertainty of the wilderness, suddenly became something far more concrete. The remote location, the manner of concealment, and the emerging evidence of foul play transformed the investigation's nature entirely. As news helicopters circled overhead and journalists gathered at the track entrance, Sergeant Helen Parker, now nearing retirement, returned to the case that had haunted her career. Standing at the discovery site, she felt both vindication and regret. Her initial instincts about foul play had been correct, but the truth had remained hidden in plain sight, just beyond reach, for 25 years. The forest had finally yielded its secret, but this was only the beginning. The real question now wasn't what had happened to Samantha Brooks, but who had gone to such lengths to hide her body in this remote corner of the Fiordland wilderness. The answer would prove more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The discovery of Samantha Brooks' remains transformed a decades-old missing persons case into an active homicide investigation. Modern forensic techniques revealed details that would have been impossible to detect in 1990, painting a disturbing picture of her final moments. Dr. James Murphy's laboratory became the center of the investigation. Under powerful microscopes, the preserved tissue beneath Samantha's fingernails told a story of desperate struggle. The samples contained not just her DNA, but genetic material from her attacker, preserved by the unique chemical properties of the Fiordland soil. Lisa Wong approached the case with fresh eyes, meticulously reviewing every document from 1990. She discovered a pattern that had gone unnoticed during the original investigation. Between 1988 and 1990, 5 solo female hikers had reported unsettling encounters on various New Zealand tracks, including 3 on the Milford track itself. The reports were spread across different police districts, Wong explained. Filed as isolated incidents, they seemed unremarkable, but when viewed together, a clear pattern emerged. Each woman described being followed, photographed, or approached by a male track worker who made them feel threatened. The investigation team created a comprehensive database of all Department of Conservation employees who had worked on the Milford track during the relevant period. Cross-referencing work schedules with reported incidents revealed a striking correlation. Thomas Kelly had been on duty during each reported encounter. Kelly's employment history showed a pattern of transfers between different tracks, always after complaints from female hikers. His supervisors had documented concerns about his behavior, but in the isolated world of New Zealand's trail system, such reports rarely led to serious consequences. Sergeant Parker, working closely with Wong, began interviewing former track workers who had known Kelly. A disturbing portrait emerged of a man who maintained a facade of professional competence while harboring darker tendencies. Several colleagues recalled his unusual interest in solo female hikers and his detailed knowledge of the track's most isolated sections. The breakthrough came when investigators located Kelly's personal effects, stored in a Department of Conservation facility since his death in 1994. Among his possessions, they found a collection of photographs solo female hikers captured without their knowledge. More disturbingly, they discovered detailed maps marking locations far from the main track, including the area where Samantha's remains were found. DNA analysis of the material preserved under Samantha's fingernails provided the final piece of the puzzle. The genetic profile matched samples taken from Kelly's stored belongings. The evidence suggested a violent struggle. Samantha had fought back fiercely against her attacker, unknowingly preserving the evidence that would eventually identify him. The investigation expanded to examine other unsolved disappearances on New Zealand's tracks during Kelly's tenure. 3 cases shared striking similarities with Samantha's: solo female hikers who vanished without trace, all on tracks where Kelly had worked. Though these cases remained officially unresolved, the pattern was unmistakable. Former colleagues began to remember other disturbing details. Kelly had an uncanny knowledge of search and rescue procedures, often predicting which areas teams would focus on. He had participated in several searches, including the one for Samantha, using his insider knowledge to ensure investigators looked in the wrong places. Wang's team discovered Kelly had meticulously planned his attacks, using his position as track warden to identify vulnerable targets. He monitored the hut booking system to track solo female hikers, and his work schedule gave him intimate knowledge of the track's most isolated sections. The investigation revealed how Kelly had exploited the very systems designed to keep hikers safe. His position of authority allowed him to move freely throughout the park, and his knowledge of search protocols helped him evade detection. His death in 1994 had inadvertently protected his secrets for decades. As the evidence mounted, investigators faced a grim realization. They had uncovered not just a single murder, but the work of a predator who had used New Zealand's pristine wilderness as his hunting ground. The majestic Milford track, celebrated for its natural beauty, had concealed a darker human story beneath its emerald canopy. The breakthrough in Samantha Brooks' case came not through a detective's intuition or a witness's memory, but through the patient precision of modern science. In a sterile laboratory in Wellington, Dr. James Murphy hunched over his microscope, examining the microscopic evidence that had waited 25 years to tell its story. The material preserved beneath Samantha's fingernails yielded its secret slowly. Soil analysis revealed she had indeed fought for her life in the exact location where her remains were found, far from the searched areas. But it was the DNA evidence that would finally shatter decades of silence. The preservation was remarkable, Dr. Murphy would later testify. The unique chemical composition of Fiordland soil, combined with the depth at which the remains were buried, created perfect conditions for DNA retention. We found not just Samantha's genetic material, but clear traces of her attacker's DNA. When the genetic profile was run through New Zealand's databases, it initially yielded no matches. The breakthrough came when Lisa Wang suggested testing items from Thomas Kelly's stored belongings. Kelly, a former track warden who died in 1994, had left behind a collection of personal effects in Department of Conservation storage. The match was undeniable. Kelly's DNA, extracted from his old belongings, perfectly aligned with the genetic material found under Samantha's fingernails. But this discovery was just the beginning. As investigators delved deeper into Kelly's past, a pattern of predatory behavior emerged with chilling clarity. In his locker, untouched since his death, investigators found a carefully maintained collection of photographs. Dozens of solo female hikers captured without their knowledge, their images annotated with dates and locations. Some photos showed women at rest stops, others at stream crossings, intimate moments stolen by a hidden observer. More disturbing were the maps. Kelly had marked locations far from the main track, places where a scream would be swallowed by the wilderness. One such marking corresponded exactly to where Samantha's remains were found. Other markings suggested possible locations of additional victims. Former colleagues, speaking now without fear of their dead coworker, recalled Kelly's odd behaviors. He would often volunteer for solitary patrol duties, particularly when solo female hikers were on the track. He maintained detailed records of trail bookings, paying special attention to women traveling alone. He knew every hiding spot, every unofficial trail, recalled retired Ranger Michael Thompson. We thought it was professional dedication. Now we understand he was mapping hunting grounds. The investigation revealed how Kelly had used his position to orchestrate his attacks. As a track warden, he had access to hiking schedules, knew the search protocols, and understood how to mislead rescue teams. He had even participated in the search for Samantha, steering efforts away from where he had hidden her body. When investigators cross-referenced Kelly's work history with unsolved disappearances, 3 other cases aligned perfectly. Each involved a solo female hiker who vanished without trace on tracks where Kelly had worked. While these cases remained officially open, the pattern was unmistakable. Kelly's death in a 1994 mountaineering accident had initially seemed unrelated to the Brooks case. Now, investigators wondered if his fatal fall had truly been accidental, or if the weight of his crimes had finally caught up with him. The DNA evidence provided irrefutable proof of Kelly's guilt in Samantha's murder. Analysis of the defensive wounds on her remains suggested she had fought fiercely, perhaps recognizing in those final moments that her attacker was someone who should have been her protector on the track. For Sergeant Helen Parker, the breakthrough brought mixed emotions. "We finally had our answer," she said, "but it came decades too late for justice in any traditional sense. The best we could offer the Brooks family was the truth, and the knowledge that their daughter fought bravely until the end." The case would force New Zealand's Department of Conservation to confront uncomfortable questions about staff monitoring and track safety. But for now, science had accomplished what years of searching could not. It had given voice to a victim who had waited a quarter century to tell her story. The resolution of the Samantha Brooks case sent shockwaves through New Zealand's outdoor community, fundamentally changing how the nation approached wilderness safety. In December 2015, the New Zealand police officially closed the investigation, confirming Thomas Kelly as the perpetrator of not just Samantha's murder, but likely 3 other disappearances spanning his career on the country's hiking tracks. For Margaret Brooks, the confirmation brought a complex mixture of closure and renewed grief. "We always knew something terrible had happened to Samantha," she said during the final press conference. "But learning that she died at the hands of someone meant to protect her, someone who continued working on that track while we searched, that knowledge carries its own special kind of pain." The Department of Conservation underwent a complete overhaul of its hiring and monitoring procedures. Background checks became more rigorous, and a new system of staff rotation prevented any single warden from developing the type of territorial control Kelly had maintained. Regular psychological evaluations became mandatory for all employees working in isolated locations. Milford Track itself was transformed by the case's resolution. A small memorial plaque now marks a rest area near Mackinnon Pass, bearing Samantha's name and those of Kelly's other confirmed victims. Sarah Chen disappeared 1988, Maria Holbrook disappeared 1989, and Rebecca Wilson disappeared 1990. The plaque serves as both memorial and warning, reminding hikers that human dangers can lurk even in natural paradise. The impact on New Zealand's solo hiking culture proved significant. While the Department of Conservation stopped short of banning solo hiking, they implemented a mandatory buddy system for certain tracks and times of year. Personal locator beacons became compulsory equipment for all overnight hikers, and new emergency shelters were constructed at strategic points along major tracks. Dr. James Murphy's forensic work on the case led to the establishment of a specialized wilderness crime unit within New Zealand's police force. The unit focuses on cold cases involving disappearances in remote areas, applying modern forensic techniques to long-abandoned investigations. 2 other historical disappearances have since been solved using methods developed during the Brooks case. Lisa Wong continued her work with the Department of Conservation, developing new safety protocols that became a model for wilderness management worldwide. Samantha's case taught us that safety isn't just about protecting people from natural hazards, Wang explained. It's about creating systems that prevent anyone from exploiting the isolation these beautiful places provide. The revelation of Kelly's crimes also sparked a painful period of self-examination among his former colleagues. Many had noticed his unusual behaviors but failed to recognize their significance. This led to the development of new training programs teaching track staff to identify and report concerning patterns of behavior among both colleagues and hikers. Sergeant Helen Parker retired in 2016. The Brooks case finally closed. Her last official act was to return Samantha's recovered camera to the Brooks family. Though damaged by years in the elements, some images remained intact. Final photographs of native orchids, captured hours before her death, preserving forever her passion for New Zealand's natural beauty. Today, Samantha Brooks' legacy lives on in multiple ways. The environmental science program at Auckland Grammar School established a scholarship in her name, supporting students pursuing careers in conservation. Her teaching materials about New Zealand's native plants became part of a national curriculum. And perhaps most importantly, her case fundamentally changed how New Zealand's wilderness areas are managed and protected. The Milford Track continues to draw thousands of hikers annually, its beauty undiminished by the dark chapter in its history. But now, beneath the soaring peaks and beside the crystal streams, new systems and protocols ensure that solo female hikers can follow their passion for wilderness adventure with greater security than ever before. Margaret Brooks visits the track once each year, making the journey to the memorial plaque that bears her sister's name. Samantha loved these mountains, she says, and in a way, they helped reveal the truth about what happened to her. Now her story helps protect others, and that's exactly what she would have wanted.